Came home 3 days early because I had a bad feeling. That's the only way I can explain it. No phone call, no message, nothing concrete, just that hollow weight in my chest that 15 years in special operations teaches you never to ignore. My unit called it the quiet alarm, the feeling that something in your world has gone wrong while you weren't watching. I'd been stationed at Fort Bragg running a joint training cycle with the 82nd when my CO approved the early leave. I drove the 7 hours from North Carolina to her house in Summerville, South Carolina without stopping, not even for gas, until the needle was scraping empty somewhere around Florence. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. My daughter was 18, practically an adult, living with my brother-in-law while I was gone, because my wife had taken a work trip to Charlotte. Everything was arranged. Everything was fine. I pulled into the driveway at 11:40 p.m. on a Thursday. The porch light was off. We always kept a porch light on. I'd installed a smart switch for it specifically because my daughter was afraid of coming home to a dark house. That switch was on a timer. It did not turn itself off. I sat in the truck for 90 seconds just looking at the front of that house. Then I got out. The door was unlocked. Not kicked in, not forced, just unlocked, the deadbolt thrown back, the handle turning smooth and easy when I touched it. I stood in the doorway and listened. The house had a sound when it was lived in, a kind of background hum of the refrigerator and the air handler and the low creak of the floor settling. I could hear all of that. What I could not hear was my daughter, Savannah. Nothing. I cleared the first floor in under 2 minutes. Living room, kitchen, laundry room, the half bath under the stairs. When I came around the corner to the staircase, I nearly missed her. She was folded against the wall at the base of the stairs like she'd been trying to crawl down and run out of strength halfway. Her phone was cracked on the floor 3 feet away. There was blood matted into her hair above her left ear. I was on my knees next to her before I'd made a conscious decision to move. She was breathing. Pulse strong. I did a field assessment in the dark. Head wound, significant swelling, no apparent spinal involvements, both pupils responding, no other visible injuries. I called 911 and kept her still until the ambulance came. I rode with her. I set him at Trauma Bay at Trident Medical Center, and I did not leave her side while they ran the CT and stitched the laceration and confirmed what I already feared. She had a moderate traumatic brain injury. They talked to me about monitoring, about rest, about potential complications. I heard the words, but they weren't landing in any normal way. They were just sounds. At 2017 a.m., a Somerville PD detective named Fowler came and sat across from me in the waiting room. He had a yellow legal pad and a styrofoam cup of coffee and the practiced calm of a man who had delivered bad news often enough that it no longer showed on his face. "Can you tell me what you found when you arrived, Mr. Holt?" I told him. All of it, in the sequence it happened. He wrote things down. He asked me about the door, about the light, about whether anything appeared stolen. I told him I hadn't done a full walkthrough. He said his officers were at the house now. "Where's my brother-in-law?" I asked. Fowler looked at his pad. "We haven't been able to reach her." He checked the name. Uprise Langford. He was staying at the house while I was deployed. My wife asked him to. He was supposed to be there. Fowler's expression didn't change. "We'll keep trying." I spent the rest of that night in a chair beside my daughter's bed, listening to the monitors and thinking about the door that opened without being forced. Her name was Savannah. Savannah Holt. She was 18 years old and had just been accepted early decision to Clemson, and she wanted to study environmental engineering because, she told me once with complete seriousness, somebody had to fix the rivers. She had her mother's dark hair and her grandfather's stubbornness, and a laugh that was so much louder than you'd expect from someone her size that strangers always turned to look. She had grown up watching me leave and come back, and she had never once made me feel guilty for it. Not once. She used to draw on my deployment bags with a Sharpie. Little stick figures of the two of us, captioned with things like, "Dad plus me, undefeated." She woke up on the second day. She remembered almost nothing from the night it happened. She remembered making dinner. She remembered hearing something downstairs. Then, nothing. "Was someone in the house?" she asked me. Her voice was rough, her eyes still fighting the light. "We're still figuring that out." She looked at me for a long moment. She knew what that meant. She'd grown up in a military household. "Uncle Bryce was supposed to be there," she said. "I know." "He wasn't." "I know." She turned her face toward the window and didn't say anything else for a while. My brother-in-law, Bryce Langford, was 34 years old. He was my wife Diane's younger brother, and I had known him for almost 12 years. Since before Diane and I got married, since the days when he was just the scrappy 22-year-old who showed up to holiday dinners with wrong-sized wine and stayed too late. He'd been in and out of trouble when he was younger, some bad debt, one DUI that the family didn't like to talk about, but he'd cleaned himself up over the past few years. Got a job with a logistics company out of North Charleston, started showing up to things on time. Diane trusted him completely. I trusted him because Diane did. He had been staying in our guest room for 2 weeks. He did not answer his phone for 48 hours after I called 911. When he finally did answer, on the second afternoon, his voice had the particular quality of a man who has rehearsed what he's going to say. "I'm so sorry, man. I heard about Savannah. I've been dealing with something. I'm so sorry. Is she okay? How is she? Where were you that night? I had to go to Columbia. Last minute thing for work, I should have. You were supposed to be at that house. I know. I know, man. And I'm come to the hospital." There was a pause that lasted about 3 seconds too long. "Yeah," he said. "Of course, I'll come." He came. He sat in the room for 20 minutes looking at Savannah like a man doing penance, and he hugged me in the hallway and said all the right things. And when he left, I watched him cross the parking lot from the window, and I noticed two things. He walked fast, not in a hurry, but like a man who needed distance, and when he got to his truck, he sat in it for 4 minutes without starting the engine. I photographed his license plate from the window. I needed to understand what happened in my house. The police were working it. Detective Fowler called me every day, patient and professional. But I had done 17 years of intelligence work in environments where waiting for official channels meant coming home in a box. I was not going to wait. I started with the security system. We had a Simply Safe setup, camera at the front door and the garage, motion sensors on the first floor. The system had been disarmed at 7:43 p.m. on the night it happened. Disarmed using the master code, not the guest code I'd given Bryce. The master code, which only Savannah and I and Diane knew. Diane had been in Charlotte. Savannah had not disarmed it. The timestamp was 30 minutes before she told the detective she heard something downstairs. I called Diane. She was driving back when she heard she'd arrived at the hospital in pieces, and she'd spent the first day at Savannah's bedside barely speaking. I had not pushed her. I pushed her now. Who else has the master code? What? The security system master code. Who else did you give it to? A pause. I might have. Bryce asked me for it. A few months ago. He said he was going to come by and sign for a delivery while we were both at work, and he needed to be able to turn the alarm off. You didn't tell me. I didn't think. It didn't seem like. Her voice broke. Oh, God. I sat with that for a long moment. I need you to think carefully, I said. Has Bryce mentioned anything about money? Problems? Debts? Silence. Diane. He asked to borrow $8,000 about 4 months ago. He said it was for a car repair and some back rent. I gave it to him. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd be angry. $8,000? In our world, that was not a car repair. That was the beginning of something bigger. I spent the next 4 days running my brother-in-law the way I used to run surveillance targets overseas. It was not complicated. He was not trained. He had a credit card trail and a phone that connected to public Wi-Fi everywhere he went, and a social circle that was not careful about what it said out loud in sports bars. What I found was this. Bryce had a gambling problem that had been running underground for about 2 years. Not casinos. A private operation out of West Ashley, the kind of place that doesn't card you and doesn't report losses, and does employ people to collect when you stop paying. He owed a man named Hollis. That was the only name I ever got, no last name, just Hollis. Somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000. The $8,000 Diane gave him had bought him 3 months of breathing room. Then the breathing room ran out. I don't know exactly what Hollis told him. I don't know how the conversation went or what was threatened. What I know is the result. Bryce gave someone the alarm code and left the house empty on a night when my 18-year-old daughter was alone in it. Whether he told them she'd be home, I still don't know. I choose to believe he didn't. I choose to believe that because the alternative, that he knew and left anyway, is something I cannot sit with without losing myself entirely. Savannah was not supposed to be hurt. They were looking for something. That much became clear when I did the full walkthrough of the house that I hadn't been able to do the first night. My office had been turned, not ransacked, searched, by someone who knew what they were looking for and knew approximately where to look. My files were touched, my safe was attempted, my laptop had been moved. They were looking for my work documents. I'm not going to detail what I do exactly. I'll say that in my current role, contract work for a defense intelligence subcontractor based out of Raleigh, I occasionally move through material that is not meant to leave a controlled environment. I had not brought anything home. I want to be clear about that. But someone believed I had, or at least believed it was worth checking. The connection between a gambling debt collector named Hollis and a defense intelligence target was not a connection I expected to find. It took me another 6 days and a conversation with a former colleague at DIA to start understanding the shape of it. Hollis was not just running a collection operation. He was a broker, the word my contact used, someone who connected people who needed to access things they shouldn't access with people who were positioned to get them. He'd done it before, always through leverage, always through someone who had a problem and needed it to go away. Bryce was not the first person he'd run this play on. He was just the first one who pointed at my house. I did not go to the police with this. Not immediately. I went to my contractor, I went to my chain of contact, I reported the attempted breach. That part, the official part, moved through its proper channels. I cooperated fully. I'm not telling you about any of that here because most of it is not mine to tell. What I am telling you about is Bryce. I met him at a bar in Goose Creek on a Tuesday afternoon, 10 days after I found Savannah on the stairs. I picked the bar because it was public and because I needed to be in a public place when I had this conversation. I needed witnesses to the fact that I kept my hands on the table. He was already there when I walked in. He had a beer he wasn't drinking and a look on his face like a man waiting for a verdict. I sat down across from him and I looked at him for a while without saying anything. "I know what you did," I said. He didn't deny it. That almost surprised me. I think I expected him to perform confusion, to run the script. Instead, he put both hands flat on the table and stared at them. "I didn't know they'd go in when she was there," he said. "I swear to you. I swear. I thought they told me it would be when the house was empty. I thought you were gone, and Diane was in Charlotte, and Savannah was at a friend's." "She was home." "I know." His voice cracked. "I know. She could have died, Bryce. The CT showed a bleed. A small one, but it was there. If I hadn't come home early." He put his face in his hands. I sat there watching him. I thought about all the things I was capable of doing and all the things I was willing to do, and I kept my hands flat on the table. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to talk to the police. Everything. Hollis, the debt, the code, all of it. You're going to walk into the Somerville PD, and you're going to give a full statement, and you're going to cooperate with everything that comes after." He looked up. "If I do that, Hollis, I know what Hollis will do. I also know what I'll do. I also know what I'll do. And you should think very carefully about which one of those outcomes you'd prefer to have as your problem." He went to the police the next morning. I know because Detective Fowler called me afterward, and there was something different in his voice, a sharpening, the sound of a case that had just cracked open. The investigation that followed took 4 months and reached further than Somerville. I was interviewed multiple times. Diane was interviewed. Savannah, when she was well enough, gave her statement. I kept my daughter informed about everything she had a right to know, which was most of it. She was 18. She was not a child, and she had earned the right to understand what had happened in her own home. Hollis was arrested in November. The charge sheet was long: extortion, conspiracy to commit burglary, assault with serious bodily injury, and several counts related to the intelligence-adjacent elements that I can't discuss. He is currently awaiting trial. His attorney has already floated a plea offer. The prosecutor's office has not accepted it. Bryce pled guilty to criminal conspiracy and reckless endangerment. He received 30 months and served 18 before being released to a halfway house. Diane attended his sentencing. I did not. Diane and I have had many long conversations about her brother, and about the $8,000, and about the alarm code, and about the nature of marriage when two people spend years operating in parallel rather than together. Those conversations are still happening. I don't know yet where they end. Savannah recovered. That is the sentence I want to live inside. She recovered. The bleed resolved, the headaches faded over about 6 weeks, and she started at Clemson the following August, only 1 semester delayed. She texted me a photo from her dorm room the day she moved in. A small, slightly blurry picture of a Sharpie drawing she'd done on the inside of her closet door. 2 stick figures. Captioned, "Dad plus me. Still undefeated." I keep that photo as my lock screen. After the sentencing, I started doing something I hadn't done since she was little. I called her every Sunday, not just a check-in text, an actual call. She always answers, which tells me something about who she is. We talk about her classes, about her roommate, about the research project she's working on involving phosphorus runoff in the Saluda River system. I talk about work, about the house, about the repair projects I keep starting and not finishing. It's ordinary. It's the most valuable thing I own. There are things I did during those 10 days before I sat across from Bryce in that bar that I haven't told Detective Fowler about. I'm not going to tell you about them either. I'll say that Hollis's operation ran on the assumption that the people he leveraged were too scared, too compromised, or too civilian to push back in any meaningful way. He was right about that most of the time. He was not right about me. I don't need you to tell me that I should have handed everything to law enforcement immediately and let the system work. I've heard that argument and I understand it, and there are parts of it I even agree with. But I also know what I came home to. I know what it looked like when I found my daughter on those stairs. I know the particular cold that went through me in that moment, the way everything became very still and very clear. I had spent 15 years training to protect things that mattered. I had flown to places you've never heard of and done things I'll never describe to protect people I'd never meet. And the one person I would have burned the world down for was lying on the floor of her own house because her uncle needed to clear a debt. I did what I was trained to do. I gathered intelligence. I identified the network. I eliminated the threat through the appropriate channels, and a few channels that were perhaps less appropriate, though nothing I'll lose sleep over. Savannah is in Clemson studying how to clean up rivers. She's going to be fine. That's the whole story. That's all of it that matters. The thing that stays with me, not the fear, not the anger, but the thing I actually think about when I'm driving alone at night, is how ordinary the betrayal looked from the outside. Bryce came to the hospital. He sat in the chair. He said the right words. And if I hadn't spent 15 years learning to read the space between what people say and what their bodies do, I might have believed him. That's what scares me most, looking back. Not that someone close to us caused harm, but that harm can wear a familiar face and sit in a hospital room and hug you in the hallway and feel completely normal. I've thought a lot about what actually went wrong. Not just on the night it happened, but in the years leading up to it. Bryce didn't become the person who handed over that alarm code in a single moment. It happened slowly, and the gap between the man he wanted people to think he was and the choices he was making when no one was watching. He borrowed money and didn't tell the truth about why. He dug a hole and kept it hidden. And when the hole got deep enough, he made a decision that put my daughter on those stairs. There's a cause behind every effect, and the cause here wasn't a gambling debt. It was the accumulated weight of years of choosing convenience over honesty. That weight eventually has to land somewhere. In this case, it landed on an 18-year-old girl who wanted to study rivers. What I keep coming back to is this. The night I found Savannah, the only thing that changed the outcome was that I had trained my instincts not to ignore a bad feeling. I drove 7 hours on a hunch. I didn't talk myself out of it because it was inconvenient, because I'd look foolish if I was wrong, because the logical thing was to stay at Fort Bragg and finish the cycle. I trusted my read of the situation even when I couldn't explain it. That's not luck. That's years of discipline building something quiet in the back of your mind that functions even when your rational brain is trying to override it. And then, once I found her, I didn't panic. I assessed. I acted on what I knew rather than what I feared. I kept my hands on the table when everything in me wanted to do otherwise. That restraint, holding the line between what you're capable of and what's actually right, is something I've had to practice my whole adult life. It didn't come naturally. It came from having it tested enough times in enough dark places that I finally understood the difference between force that protects and force that just satisfies. Savannah texted me last Sunday. She was presenting her river research at a regional conference in the spring. She sounded like herself, impatient and excited and slightly annoyed that the faculty advisor keeps suggesting she soften her conclusions. I told her not to soften anything. She's going to be fine. She was always going to be fine because that's who she is. But I think about the version of that night where I stayed at Fort Bragg, where I told myself the feeling was nothing, where I came home on the scheduled date to a house that had already finished keeping its secrets. I think about that version a lot. I came home early. That's the whole equation. Everything else followed from that one decision to trust what I knew over what was comfortable. If this story does anything for the people listening, I hope it's this. The people who matter most to you are not protected by good intentions. They're protected by attention, by the willingness to notice when something is wrong and act on it before you have proof, by the discipline to build your life and yourself in a way that makes you useful when it counts. Savannah drew those stick figures on her closet door, still undefeated. I'm going to keep earning that.